Michel Houellebecq. Those who love life do not read. Nor do they go to the movies, actually. No matter what might be said, access to the artistic universe is more or less entirely the preserve of those who are a little fed up with the world. Anything can happen in life, especially nothing. Humor won't save you. It doesn't really do anything at all. You can look at life ironically for years, maybe decades. There are people who seem to go through most of their lives, seeing the funny side, but in the end, life always breaks your heart. Doesn't matter how brave you are, how reserved, or how much you've developed a sense of humor, you still end up with your heart broken. That's when you stop laughing. In the end there's just the cold, the silence and the loneliness. In the end, there's only death. It's a curious idea to reproduce, when you don't even like life. An entire life spent reading would have fulfilled my every desire. I already knew that at the age of 7. The texture of the world is painful, inadequate, unalterable, or so it seems to me. Really, I believe that an entire life spent reading would have suited me best. Such a life has not been granted me. Not having anything around to read is dangerous. You have to content yourself with life itself, and that can lead you to take risks. I don't like this world. I definitely do not like it. The society in which I live disgusts me, advertising sickens me, computers make me puke. Youth was the time for happiness, its only season. Young people, leading a lazy, carefree life, partially occupied by scarcely absorbing studies, were able to devote themselves unlimitedly to the liberated exaltation of their bodies. They could play, dance, love, and multiply their pleasures. They could leave a party, in the early hours of the morning, in the company of sexual partners they had chosen, and contemplate the dreary line of employees going to work. They were the salt of the earth, and everything was given to them, everything was permitted for them, everything was possible. Later on, having started a family, having entered the adult world, they would be introduced to worry, work, responsibility, and the difficulties of existence. They would have to pay taxes, submit themselves to administrative formalities, while ceaselessly bearing witness powerless, and, shame-filled to the irreversible degradation of their own bodies, which would be slow at first, then increasingly rapid. Above all, they would have to look after children, mortal enemies, in their own homes. They would have to pamper them, feed them, worry about their illnesses, provide the means for their education and their pleasure, and unlike in the world of animals, this would last not just for a season. They would remain slaves of their offspring always. The time of joy was well and truly over for them. They would have to continue to suffer until the end, in pain and with increasing health problems, until they were no longer good for anything and were definitively thrown into the rubbish heap, cumbersome and useless. In return, their children would not be at all grateful. On the contrary, their efforts, however strenuous, would never be considered enough. They would, until the bitter end, be considered guilty because of the simple fact of being parents. From this sad life, marked by shame, all joy would be pitilessly banished. When they wanted to draw near to young people's bodies, they would be chased away, rejected, ridiculed, insulted, and more often nowadays, imprisoned. The physical bodies of young people, the only desirable possession the world has ever produced, were reserved for the exclusive use of the young, and the fate of the old was to work and to suffer. This was the true meaning of solidarity between generations, it was a pure and simple holocaust of each generation in favor of the one that replaced it, a cruel, prolonged holocaust that brought with it no consolation, no comfort, nor any material or emotional compensation. Few beings have ever been so impregnated, pierced to the core, by the conviction of the absolute futility of human aspiration. The universe is nothing but a furtive arrangement of elementary particles. A figure in transition toward chaos. That is what will finally prevail. The human race will disappear. Other races in turn will appear and disappear. The skies will be glacial and empty, traversed by the feeble light of half-dead stars. These too will disappear. Everything will disappear. And human actions are as free and as stripped of meaning as the unfettered movements of the elementary particles. Good, evil, morality, sentiments. Pure Victorian fictions. All that exists is egotism. Cold, intact, and radiant. The terrible predicament of a beautiful girl, is that only an experienced womanizer, someone cynical and without scruple, feels up to the challenge. More often than not, she will lose her virginity to some filthy lowlife, in what proves to be the first step in an irrevocable decline. The disappearance of patrimonial transmission, means that an old guy today is just a useless ruin. The thing we value most of all is youth, which means that life automatically becomes depressing, because life consists, on the whole, of getting old. To increase desires to an unbearable level, whilst making the fulfillment of them more and more inaccessible, this was the single principle upon which Western society was based. It is in our relations with other people that we gain a sense of ourselves. It's that, pretty much, that makes relations with other people unbearable. It is interesting to note that the sexual revolution was sometimes portrayed as a communal utopia, whereas in fact it was simply another stage in the historical rise of individualism. As the lovely word, household suggests, the couple and the family would be the last bastion of primitive communism in liberal society. The sexual revolution was to destroy these intermediary communities, the last to separate the individual from the market. The destruction continues to this day. It's a fact, that in societies like ours, sex truly represents a second system of differentiation, completely independent of money, and as a system of differentiation, it functions just as mercilessly. The effects of these two systems are, furthermore, strictly equivalent. Just like unrestrained economic liberalism, and for similar reasons, sexual liberalism produces phenomena of absolute pauperization. Some men make love every day, others 5 or 6 times in their life, or never. Some make love with dozens of women, others with none. It's what's known as the law of the market. Economic liberalism is an extension of the domain of the struggle, its extension to all ages and all classes of society. Sexual liberalism is likewise an extension of the domain of the struggle.